What's going on, everybody? Ian for Cult of Mac. And 10 years ago, Steve Jobs was on stage at the Yerba Buena Convention Center to introduce us to a new product. Something that was not an iPhone or not a smartphone, and also not a laptop. Something that sat right in the middle and was better than both in a few key areas. Something designed for browsing the web, dealing with emails, editing or dealing with your photos, something for consuming video or playing games, music, and even for reading books. And that product was the iPad. This iPad, to be specific, the first generation iPad. The original iPad was both remarkable and kind of disappointing. The hardware looked amazing. It had these nice squared off edges. It was only a ½ inch thick and weighed about 1.5 pounds, making it far lighter than any laptop Apple sold at the time. But the software was basically that of the original iPod, and it was something that people constantly kind of languished the iPad for in its early days. But none of that really seemed to matter a whole lot, because the iPad ultimately nailed all those things that Jobs promised that it would be great at. It was an awesome device for surfing the web, and you could interact with it right in the palm of your hands. It was a great device for dealing with email, because you could quickly read your email, deal with your inbox, and respond right on the iPad. It was more convenient than using the 3.5-inch smartphones that we had at the time. It was also great for editing photos. Granted, most of the photo editing apps were pretty simple at the time. It was still a great device for doing that because you could see your photos so much bigger. It was also a really great device for consuming content, whether it was books or news or magazines or watching videos on YouTube or things you purchase on iTunes. It was a great device for a lot of those things. Now, even to this day, the original iPad looks and feels really cool. Sure, it's a heck of a lot heavier than any of the other iPads that are out today, and it's also significantly thicker than, say, the most modern iPad Pros on the market, but it's also not hard to see the through line from this iPad to every iPad that currently exists or that has existed in the past. It wasn't even until 2019 that we lost the 9.7-inch screen size that started with this first generation iPad. And many of the iPads in the current lineup still feature a home button, just like this one did back in 2010. So even though we've added cameras and retina displays and swapped out the 30-pin connector for a lightning port and added Touch ID or Face ID to the more modern iPads, or given them, faster processors and more RAM, the ultimate design of the iPad really hasn't changed that dramatically in the last decade. And I think that says a lot about a product that they introduced 10 years ago that everyone said was just going to be an iPod, but bigger. So the addition of cameras and Touch ID, smart connectors, retina displays, and lightning ports have all added functionality or capability to the iPad, but they haven't fundamentally changed what the iPad is in the last decade. Sure, the software has changed a lot and added a lot of features that have moved the iPad far closer to the Mac and far further from the days of the iPod, but the iPad itself is still a product that definitely fits squarely between an iPhone and a Mac and can be used for a lot of really great, really important, really useful things if you're willing to give it the chance. The iPad really is a fantastic device, and I think it's something that Apple couldn't predict a decade ago, to know that the iPad itself would become this creative tool as well as a content consumption tool that really would sit for a long time between the phone and the Mac. And even as they push it further and further towards being a computer replacement for literally millions of people, the iPad itself is still much like it was back in 2010. A great piece of technology that allows you to interact with the world in the palm of your hands at a comfortable size, a comfortable feel, a comfortable form factor, and something that's really changed Apple's ideas moving forward in technology. So whether you're a lover or hater of the iPad, it really doesn't matter. It's hard to deny that the iPad was super influential back in 2010. And as you see the different things that Apple has done over the last decade, year in and year out, both with the hardware and with the software, it's hard to ignore that the iPad has become an integral part of Apple's DNA, Apple's idea of what computing and personal computing are as we go forward and into the future. So a decade later, the iPad is still as strong as it ever was, and it's all thanks to this guy, the original iPad, and its very awesome, futuristic, albeit slow hardware and an OS that was built for a phone and has since been forked into something that works for really getting things done. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. While you're down there, let me know what your first iPad was, whether you were a first-gen iPad user or you waited all the way until the iPad Pros as of late to jump on board. I'm always curious to see what you guys are using and see what you guys are digging in the Apple lineup. Also, be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any uploads. So we're trying to do this more and more often. Also, if you haven't caught the latest episode of the Cultcast, we're now posting those to YouTube, so be sure to look out for those. And until next time, I'm Ian for Cult of Mac, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.